But how to solve these problems, how to handle these issues, Niti Aayog yesterday has released two major reports. The whole idea of iPhones and electronics now playing is a third largest item of exports after engineering goods and petroleum sector exports is a very pleasant happening. There have been several initiatives like the PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan, dedicated freight corridors, Bharat Mala Pariyojana, Sagar Mala project, integrate unified logistics interface platform, etc., etc.
Hello and a warm welcome to this episode of Chintan Speaks, the podcast presented to you by Chintan Research Foundation, CRF, where we bring you timely conversations on issues shaping the future of India and the world. Today, we'll be having a conversation in the backdrop of an upcoming CRF event titled Export-Led Growth, Unlocking India's Trade Potential for Sustainable Development, to be held on 14 November 2025 at New Delhi's India Habitat Center. We are delighted to have one of the driving forces behind that event, Rupa Dutta, Distinguished Fellow of Center for Economy and Trade at CRF. She has a distinguished career as an Indian Economic Service Officer, handling economic policy, strategic planning, and public administration. After that IES stint, she also served in advisory roles at Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, DPIIT, and Exim Bank. Welcome to Chintan Speaks. I am your host, Abhijit Mukhopadhyay, Senior Research Consultant at the Center for Economy and Trade at CRF. Let us start right away. The first question that I have in my mind is that the current turmoil in global business and the US tariff storm has put the focus back onto something which was and is always on the agenda of Indian policymakers, which is export-led growth. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritties of the topic, including export competitiveness, quality control, and things like logistics, the first question would be, how do you assess India's export performance in current juncture? And where do we stand now as an aspiring major global exporter of goods and services?
I would like to start by saying that thank you, CRF, thank you, Chintan, and thank you, Abhijit, for giving me this opportunity to speak about the issue of export-led growth, the event which we are planning for 14 November, the export-led growth, unlocking India's trade potential for sustainable development. And coming from a background of being a bureaucrat and now a distinguished fellow in CRF, I'm happy if I can give some of my perspectives in this area. So far as India's export growth is concerned, I would like to say that India's total exports touched an all-time high of USD 824.9 billion in the previous year, 24-25. And this is a growth of 6.01% over the previous year, which was the total figure was 778.1 billion. Now, in this, while the merchandise exports have shown some increase, the wondrous part of it is that for services exports, we have reached a very high growth momentum, reaching a historic high of 387.5 billion in 24-25. It's an increase of 13.6%. Now, if we look at the world rankings in terms of global trade, India occupies 17th position in terms of merchandise exports and 7th position so far as the service sector exports are concerned. Now, coming to your, and because I have worked in Commerce Ministry as well as DPIIT, what I would like to say is for India to become a major global exporter of goods and services, there we need to take a few clear steps. I'll come to the merchandise exports later, but let me tell about the service exports. There is a huge potential opening up in areas like, besides the ITS enabled services, the huge potential opening up in areas like legal services, accountancy, management consultancy, and we used to, and look, we have to look at what we used to call earlier the champion sector service exports. And we have to look at, besides US and UK and EU, where the service exports played a key role in the FTAs, we have to look at newer areas, newer territories, and newer services, and we can become a major, we already are, and we can become a major global player here. That's what I would like to say. On merchandise, let me give my comments a bit later.
Right. One related question that immediately that I have in my mind, what are these champion sectors that you were talking about? Some examples.
It was an older concept. I cannot really highlight on it because I mean, but we used to have a lot of discussions in Department of Commerce, and these are some of the newer areas like ITS digital services were always there. But I remember a lot of discussions on legal services. You can check out even in today's newspaper. There's a lot of talk of global law firms hiring people from India, a lot of discussions on chartered accountancy and financial services,
Very interesting.
construction service, construction area, management consultancy. These are a lot of new areas coming up.
Engineering services.
Maybe even engineering. So, and I would also like to say, yesterday only, Niti Aayog has come up with two reports. See, service sector exports, one critical issue used to be a data problem. But how to solve these problems, how to handle these issues, Niti Aayog yesterday has released two major reports. So this is one, critical area where if we can work hard, and now in countries like UK and all, we are even talking about caregiving, we are talking about music, we are talking about yoga teachers, and so on and so forth. And so similarly for countries like Japan and all, which have a larger aging population. So it is not only the higher, there are intermediate services also where we can play with the country of our size and with our kind of what we call the demographic dividend. We can play a key role to be a major player in this area.
India has already done trade deals with different countries and regional blocs like the UK, the latest one, and then before that UAE, and in between there was Eurasian Economic Union, EAEU, and that very important and crucial negotiations are going on with the USA and the European Union. However, signing trade deals is always a first step. And what are other steps that we can take as an entire nation to, in the short run, and both in the short run and the long run, to make India's exports high value, competitive globally, and accessible also?
And this is my favorite area, and this is a question on which we have interacted at various fora, even while I was a part of Commerce and DPIIT. We need to move up the value chain. Like we need to, we are, one of the key areas which is happening here is the electronics. The whole idea of iPhones and electronics now playing is a third largest item of exports after engineering goods and petroleum sector exports, is a very pleasant happening, and it is because of favorable policies of government, PLI schemes, and so many other areas. But besides electronics, in other areas like engineering services, or whether it is agricultural sector exports, or whether it's gem and jewelry, or whether it is petroleum sector, we are still more into, while situation is improving, we are still more into raw materials and intermediate products. Like for agriculture, we are doing good in exporting. We have got good figures for exporting coffee, rice, tea. But let's look at more processed products, because these are the higher value end products. These are the areas where the rest of the world is looking at. These are the areas where other countries are filling these gaps, where we can do it. For engineering sector, let's look at, not only basic iron and steel, but more of iron and steel products. For gems and jewelry, not only cutting and polishing of diamonds, but more of studded jewelry, more of silver imitation, platinum jewelry, more of lab grown diamonds. For pharma also, besides generic drugs, let's look at, I think biosimilars and biologics. So we can give a whole list, and what I would feel is that by moving up the value chain, we look into better quality. That is very important. Better designs and more resilient products, where which again I would repeat, which is being demanded. We would have all these concrete data where we can see what is the rest of the world demanding, how much India is fulfilling those areas in terms of supply, and those
Right.
are the areas where we can really do wonders. And these FTAs, besides the service sector exports, have opened up our markets for moving ahead with these kind of where merchandise sector can also do well. We have to think big, think in terms of skilling, innovation, investment, better back-end support in terms of logistics. But I'm sure we can move ahead and do well in this area.
Yeah, just to add to your point, even recently while working on textiles, actually we found out that instead of getting into high value products like commercial textile, all those best example possibly will be those within the car you have those what do you call it, that
Technical textiles.
those all technical textiles, the entire kind of technical textiles, those seat belts and other kind of things which are there. But we don't have much presence there. We don't produce too much of that. That is number one. Then number two is that, for example, to a country like Bangladesh, we export a lot of what you correctly pointed out as either raw material or intermediate goods, basically cotton and yarns. And then if we stop exporting those materials to Bangladesh, then possibly their entire export sector will be in quite a big trouble. That was the sense that I was getting, from the the broad macro data. So obviously, there is an issue. There is an issue. There is no doubt about it. But how do we cannot leapfrog to that kind of high value chain overnight, or let's say even in a year. So in a slightly longer run, let's say in a 3 to 5 years period of time, do we need to do anything extra, or do we need to focus on something?
See, this is a slightly tricky question. Firstly, for textiles, I'll say Bangladesh share in the entire global exports is 6.9%, while India's is, 4.1%. And as you said, that we are still more focusing on cotton textiles, whereas what the rest of the world demands is man-made fibers, technical textiles, and so on. And the major supply chains are now, yes, they are moving towards India, but they are already in Bangladesh inking deals with them for for the back end support in terms of their products and garments. So what I think we need to do is government and the exporters, along with the financial institutions like ECGC, Exim Bank and others, need to work together. There's a talk of this export promotion mission, which probably has to be expedited. Access to finance to the exporters, I can specially say about gems and jewelry, and probably would be true in other areas, becomes difficult. Working capital is an issue, collateral is an issue. So there has to be this kind of a collaborative approach, a kind of concerting approach, more so in today's world, where in present geopolitical situation, where you have to work together to innovate, to have better quality, to have more skilling and training. That is important. I think in such labor intensive sectors, skilling and training is important, and also work along with the MSMEs. A lot of work being done in the MSME sector, but largely most of these sectors, especially the labor intensive sectors, would have about 50 to 60% of their production coming from MSMEs. So how to work with them so that they are ready for industry 4.0, industry 5.0, and the whole gamut. So it has to be a collaborative and constructive approach. For, as you were saying, it cannot happen probably in few months, but it can definitely happen in a couple of years or so. I think if we work with the right kind of planning and of course more compliance and quality issues.
So, talking about the current geopolitical and geoeconomic scenario, let us come back briefly to our event. The CRF's event becomes a very important one in this entire backdrop. But how does this event help in the ongoing trade policy dialogue? Then, I mean, what will make this event uh, totally different from, other kind of conversations that are going on currently?
See, totally different may be a bit too strong, but what we are trying to do is to do a bit more of innovative thinking where we are trying to bring the policymakers, the intellectuals, and the think tanks together to develop what we already discussed is a concrete plan of action. How to go ahead, how to handle the geopolitical uncertainties and in today's world, and how do we promote exports. Exports should become not only an outcome of growth but also a driver of economic and structural transformation. And as we have realized that India's export potential is tremendous. But how do we move ahead in the value chain, aligning our systems with global standards of sustainability and efficiency? So what we are planning is, the details would be in the concept note and all. What we are planning is to have two sessions. One would be more on the specific labor intensive sectors and specific sectors where we have a industry specific focus, and then there would be a policy and institutional focus. So we would like to bring together different mindsets, different thoughts from the industry to the academics to the policymakers and intellectuals to the think tank, and get out. No, I would say get out, bring out a set of concrete policy recommendations which can be implemented. Because I mean, working in government, this has been an issue. There are often lot of recommendations which may take a long time or which may take huge investments. I always believe that we should take the low hanging fruits, take one step at a time, take an incremental step and see how it affects and then move ahead. So let us see if we can, let us see, we would work hard towards getting this kind of, policy recommendations and in shape at the end of the event. That is the whole idea.
Right, that will be very interesting because, I would rather say, in the context of the layers of stakeholder, it's a 360-degree kind of an approach that you are taking in organizing that entire event. So obviously, we all will be very eagerly waiting for that event, that 14th November event. The title is once again Export-Led Growth, Unlocking India's Trade Potential for Sustainable Development. Then coming back to the conversation once again. Now, let me put it this way, like the way we have updated our trade policy over the years, according to the needs, according to the dynamic scenario in the international trade and business. At the current form, is it totally adequate? Do you feel that the current trade policy will be able to address all kinds of challenges and risks that the entire global economy is posing towards India? And then also, in terms of things like trade facilitation, digitization, sustainability, there has been a lot of talk of ESG, compliance and other kind of things. Does India need another big ticket reform, particularly in the trade policy level?
Let me say this, that we had the new FTP, if I'm not mistaken, it was FTP 2025 released a few months back, and so which was aligned to the trade requirements of rest of the world. Let me give a few examples of what steps have been taken for improving the logistics, the digitization, the efficiency, reducing the turnaround time in ports, etc. NCAR came up with a very recent report in which they have mentioned that the total logistics cost accounts for 7.97% of India's GDP and 9.09% of non-services output in 23-24. So, talking about the steps being taken for more digitization and improving logistics efficiency, let me start by giving you a figure which there was a NCAR report very recently released, which very clearly, which did a hybrid model data collection of primary as well as secondary data, and the total logistics cost accounts for 7.97%.
Almost 8.
Or let's call it 8, even I would say a range of 8 to 10% of India's GDP and 9% of non-services output in 23-24. Now, there used to be a lot of talk earlier that India's logistics cost is very high, our turnaround time in ports is inoptimal, and so on and so forth. And this was quoted as 13 to 14% of GDP by various sources, which where we never had the. I know because we had worked in this area, there was no very authentic data source. So that is why NCAR was entrusted with this study, and we have come up with this interesting piece of information, which gives a clear indication of improvement in logistics efficiency. There have been several initiatives like the PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan, dedicated freight corridors, Bharat Mala Pariyojana, Sagar Mala project, integrate unified logistics interface platform, etc., etc. There would be, I mean, these would be areas discussed during the during our event. So I would not really give a lot of details, but I can also say that India in the World Bank's Logistics Performance Index, our ranking has improved from 44 to 38. In terms of World Competitiveness Index, our ranking is 39th. In terms of ease of doing business, it has improved from 142nd in 2015 to 63rd in 2020. And now we are looking, because World Bank is no longer doing the EODB rankings, but we are now looking at Enterprises Survey. I know Ministry is looking at Enterprises Survey and a Be Ready Index, which probably should have been released or is likely to be released. I can get that checked out. So there are a lot of, in the back end, if we have to move up to high end and high value products, which can be where the loading unloading time is less, which can move ahead faster, then we have to take these kind of steps. And here of course technology will play a role in terms of digitization. You can use AI for do a whole tracking of entire blockchain analysis. We can do a whole end-to-end tracking for products which may either be, say, perishable products or which may have issues such as gems and jewelry and all. So what we are looking at is that, again, steps are being taken. Sustainability is again going to be a critical issue, which we will discuss during this event, because we know that there are Europe and other countries are looking at taxation and carbon, CBAM and so many other issues. So India is doing very well in the sustainability forefront. We all know how our use of renewable sources of energy has improved, and so there would be, those are separate areas, but my point is that all these would comprise of a consolidated, integrated package for improving not only the country's overall environment and sustainability scenario, but also play a key role in promoting our exports in the international market. It can also play a role in being an USP in terms of Indian exports, playing getting a bigger mind share as well as a market share.
You are emphasizing on that entire shift towards the high value supply chain for India. Or in simple terms, India has to start exporting more high value products than the intermediate or raw material kind of products, which you amply made it clear. But in recent times, related to that, in recent times there are a lot of direct government incentive, direct government policy interventions. For example, in semiconductor chip production, a lot of debates are still going on. But then the point is that even at a lower level, I think if India can produce the chips for, I would say, the consumer durables like fridges, ACs, and TVs and things like that, then also it will in turn save a lot of foreign exchange reserve, in terms of import bills and other kind of things. If we take this context, possibly I am narrowing it down a little bit more, from what you have already stated. I am just saying that what are we doing in these areas to move from a low value chain export basket towards a high value chain export basket? And of course, definitely there will be more which can be done, but what are those things that can be done?
Now, this is a question for which I think we leave it to the event and the discussions to happen. What I can just say, maybe off the cuff, at a broader perspective, is firstly we need the right enabling environment, and which several states have already adopted such policies, which has resulted, whether it is southern states or Maharashtra, Gujarat, even Rajasthan. So, I mean, they have adopted, and now even UP is adopting a lot of positive policies. So, enabling environment in terms of, I mean, this is I would say, giving a broader perspective. Specific should come out during the discussion, and hopefully would. Enabling environment in terms of, using the right kind of labor policies, the labor codes, providing access to land to to all these industries, because industries require unencumbered large parcels of land with all the facilities. So we have these industrial corridors, we have the smart cities program, we have the labor codes, four labor codes, which are now, which have been adopted by a number of states, but a lot of other states are coming up with their own progressive labor related policies. We need, as I already mentioned, right kind of access to finance for exports, as well as even for setting up domestic industry, for improving manufacturing excellence, and also encouragement, which is now steps being taken to provide what you call the taxation rates to be user friendly. So if you ask me, I would, again, this is a favorite point of mine, I would say focus on those four basic factors of production which we learnt even from our undergrad levels: land, labor, capital, enterprise. Give the most positive and proactive response to these, and industry, and but besides, of course, issues like use of technology, skilling, training, and so many other I would say peripheral issues. Focus on these four key factors, and and the center and states work in collaboration and cooperation with each other. And I feel any industry, whether it is high-end electronics, or whether it is pharma, or whether even agricultural sector exports. So this is what is my perspective. Of course, this would be polished and refurbished during the course of the event, which is what we expect.
No, at a macro level, perfectly all right, because this is, you quite nicely summed it up. But I brought up that entire semiconductor example possibly a little bit consciously, because for example, what I am trying to say is that there will be a lot of requirements of water, even for these global data centers, which are in discussion for for the last few months now, then everybody is talking about the data centers. Even those data centers, the servers of these data centers, they will be needing a lot of water. So then comes the entire environmental angle. So are we actually ready? Not just in terms of compliance. I am not only talking about compliance. I am saying that in the in terms of future long term environmental sustainability of the economy and the nation as a whole. Are we doing enough, or more needs to be done?
See, tough question. I feel that a lot more needs to be done. But again, it's a generic reply. We probably need to get it down to specifics. And see, why only water? I think even electricity and so many other factors would be important. So probably industry needs to adapt adapt itself to the requirements with, of course, with the right kind of what you are looking probably mentioning is that government has to, from the policymakers perspective, government has to give the right kind of incentives which would which would enable industry to move into the appropriate kind of direction and take the right kind of steps. Because all investments, everything cannot obviously be done by government, but government can give the right kind of pointers and directions which then industry adopts. So that is the kind of collaboration, the industry, academia and government and policy collaboration which we really have to look forward to just giving a very small example, again off the cuff. See, once when I remember, solar energy used to be very expensive when initially the solar energy modules, but now with time we have got much less expensive solar energy usage. We have got wind energy and we have got so many others renewables. So these were, even a few years back, this was not thought of, this was not conceptualized. So situations change. But yes, one thing about our industry I would like to mention is they have to think big. They have to, look at a wider perspective, not only be satisfied. I have personally felt it from the exports point of view. Not only be satisfied with the same. If we have an X number of clients, you have to think X plus delta X number of clients. That is how you have to think big. You have to think in terms of scaling your requirements and your investments. I'm not saying you compare with other countries, but see within the Indian context how well you can improve in a structured manner.
Fair enough. We will have, because then just to wrap up the entire discussion. Then, of course, as an important institution in the policy conversation in the entire country, uh, as part of CRF, what kind of outcome you are expecting from the November trade dialogue? Yes, I know that this cannot be the last one. This will be one of the many in future. There is no doubt about it. But if I am able to rephrase the question, that what will be the ideal outcome of this November CRF event on export-led growth, which will make you feel that that we have done a good job.
Let me give a particular line. Our goal is to turn ideas into implementable reforms that make India's export story more sustainable and inclusive. So, a clear set of policy recommendations for enhancing export competitiveness, identifying key sectors for integration into global value chains, as already mentioned, deeper collaborations between policymakers, researchers, and industry leaders, and a balanced framework that aligns economic ambition with environmental and social responsibility. And as you rightly said, Abhijit, this is probably the first in a series of such events, and we'll probably have to look into several events, not only on exports but also on manufacturing, how to improve the share of manufacturing, on logistics, on digitization and efficiency, and how to take steps for providing the right kind of back end support, how to do more. There are more areas, how to do more marketing and branding, how to be more better packaged products, how to be more quality conscious, and so on and so forth. So it has to be a good mixture of both back end and front end support for all these areas which are so critical for our country to move ahead and to for us to fulfill Honorable Prime Minister's vision of Vikasit Bharat by 2047.
Thanks a lot, because you have given a very wide and a very macro and a very 360-degree kind of a view of the entire issue, and we'll be carrying on these conversations in future also. Till then, goodbye, and keep on watching Chintan Speaks.
Thank you, and we would request all of you to be part of our event.